There's quite a lot of speculation now, Richard Dawkins and others, about the existence or non-existence or provability or what of God, and I know that you've spoken about your views on this subject from time to time. What is your current feeling about having gazed deep into...
Well, my views are very moderate and therefore very dull, in the sense that if science teaches me anything relevant to religion, it teaches me that even something as simple as anatomy is pretty hard for most of us to understand. And that makes me very suspicious of anyone who claims to have anything more than a very incomplete and metaphorical view of any deep aspect of reality. So that makes me sceptical of, and indeed allergic to, claims to reveal dogmatic truths about matters of importance. And so I can never be a firm adherent of any dogmatic religious belief. Nonetheless, I believe in peaceful coexistence between mainstream religion and science, and I myself, having grown up in the tradition of the Church of England, see that the customs of my tribe, as it were, are customs that are part of my culture, part of my country's culture, and which have tremendous aesthetic resonance for me and social resonance, and so I'm very happy to participate in the rituals of the Church of England, and so I do attend my college chapel, as it were, and I do this because I believe it's important. I would be sad to see it decline, but I fully accept that if I had been born not in this country but in Iran, I'd be going to the mosque in the same spirit. And so I don't believe in any sort of absolutism. I accept it's culturally conditioned, but nonetheless I accept it as important. And I also feel slightly allergic to strident atheism, which I believe could be counterproductive for two reasons. First, I believe that fundamentalism is a threat to all of us. And this fundamentalism is of various kinds. It's the fundamentalism of the American Deep South and of Islamic fundamentalism. It's also the fundamentalism of crazy New Age sects who may talk the language of science but are cut off from any rationality and could be dangerous. So there's fundamentalism of all kinds, and I think we need all the allies we can get against it. And they include, I would say, mainstream religion, who we should have on the same side as those who are more agnostic. And I also think that we should emphasize that it's possible to practice a religion and be a scientist as well. And otherwise we will harm science, because if you were a sixth former in a British school and are a devout Muslim, and someone comes and tells you that you can't believe in Darwin and in your God, then you're going to choose your God and be lost to science. And I think that's bad for science and bad for all of us. And so I think to preach the possibility of coexistence between science and religion is something which I wish to do, and I think to do otherwise is going to be bad for society, that we'll weaken our stand against fundamentalism, and I would say bad for science and culture, because it will mean that people who would otherwise like to participate in science as a world culture will be deterred from doing so.
One is God. I always ask everyone about God, and whether they, particularly astronomers, it seems interesting to consider what their religious beliefs are. You mentioned going to chapel or church when you were at school, but has God played any part in your life since? Or
Yes, the answer is yes. I mean, I went through the normal teenage heretic episodes, and I didn't go to the chapel very much when I was a student, but you can't help, if you're brought up at an English public school, getting to know the liturgy and there in the Book of Common Prayer, and it somehow gets into your blood if you go to chapel once a day, and so I love the old music and the James Bible and all that. But I married a clergyman's daughter, and I think that was a pretty influential thing. I got to know about country parishes, and while I've been a doubter all my life, and I suppose I still am. I do believe in God, and I believe in supporting the local parish church. I mean, I don't know if you know the Church of St Edward's, just over the road here. I was church warden of St Edward's for a number of years, until I moved out to further into the country, because my wife wanted a bigger garden, and I've only quite recently retired from being church warden of my village Anglican church in Kingston. And having thought a lot about it, and people ask you questions, of course, I think there has to be a God. I can't account for the world without God. And to take the sort of atheist view of Richard Dawkins just seems to me to be total nonsense. I mean, I've read his book carefully, and his arguments fall flat as far as I'm concerned. They're not arguments even. Although it's a popular book. I mean, I think it's a popular book because he's saying what people want to hear, probably. But theoretical physics, you see, brings you into contact. I mean, I think science actually isn't anti-religion in any way, as I'm sure John Polkinghorne, I don't know if you've ever spoken to John, he writes elegantly about these things in a way I couldn't possibly do. But being a scientist and facing up to scientific understanding makes you prepared to believe in another world, and I can't just see the point of the universe unless there's an intelligence behind it, and so you might as well call it God. And when you look at the evidence, it seems to me the evidence is pretty strong too.
Well, I was pushed through the C of E world, which to the extent that it matches with a sort of humanism approach to the need for what one could call a civilized society, content with it.
So, how would you classify yourself? Agnostic, atheist, or C of E? Which some people would say was the same as both of those, but anyway.
Well, I hope I would characterise myself as tolerant. I'm completely allergic to anyone telling me what I should think on these sorts of matters, and I try very hard not to do anything which imposes my thinking on anybody else, because I would be not true to my principles if I were to do that. But the best of C of E is its tolerance.
What about the atheistic fundamentalists like Richard Dawkins? What is your view of them?
Well, Richard Dawkins having a good go at a C of E bishop who one would regard as a pretty tolerant sort of person. It's almost like going to a blood sport, isn't it? It's wonderful. I think it depends where you are. I think in the UK, in many parts of Europe, one can take a very relaxed view about the role of organised religion, of a Christian persuasion, and its impact on society. I'm shocked every time I go to the USA by the fundamentalism there, which I see as, I think fundamentalism is usually bad. And somehow what Richard Dawkins has done is just to have focused. Somehow you need to be, if you like, as extreme in the other way to be able to confront that. And I do admire him for what he's been able to do. His TV programs on, I think they were called The Root of All Evil, weren't they? Just to be provocative.
Yes.
I thought were fascinating. So I admire what he does. I don't personally find it something that I sign up to unreservedly. But I certainly give him full freedom to push his line.
Taking this just one stage further, and it's well known that some of your great physics predecessors, like Newton, were pretty religious people, and that Einstein, although he wasn't signed up to any particular religion, talked quite a lot about the sense of wonder and awe which he saw as akin to You as a celebrated physicist, having looked deep into the mysteries of the physical universe, do you see on the other side of it anything more than wonder and awe? Or?
Well, let me make a side observation, and that is that I don't think that religious belief or lack of it correlates at all with ability as a physicist. I think they seem to involve different parts of our brains. Of course you can make the connections, and I think in general one wouldn't. It's hard for a physicist to be as profoundly atheistic as Richard Dawkins comes across as. I mean, I haven't spoken to him directly. I think sometimes you need to sort of know someone well to understand what they really think, as opposed to how they are projected. One is aware that with physics that a lot of what we deal with appears to be certainty, that our models work quite astonishingly well, but we're aware that they're not reality. They're models which map reality insofar as we know them to work, and that when you stretch a bit beyond that, you have no secure foundation, and a lot of the contemplation that takes place in cosmology, which I don't do, is sort of drifts fairly quickly into what one could call theology.
Well, I was just thinking that as you were speaking, because someone I've recently interviewed is Neil Turok, and he's one of the protagonists now of parallel universes and theory and so on, and it sounds very religious to me that there is another reality just the other side of 30 to the minus, or a very small gap between us and another reality. It sounds very close to religion.
I think it's certainly the language that you would see in religion. I don't think the relationship is that straightforward, but certainly this sense that there's a lot we don't understand, and that we're sort of, it's, if you like, the paradox that some of what we have done and make use of works so well that we're confronted with the fact that it has no particular right to do that, or that we may be confronted with a different description one day. And it's that sort of sense of being both certain and uncertain that is probably good.
Yeah. Well, as Martin Rees was saying, we know very well what happened back to 1/1,000,000 of a second after the Big Bang, but before that we have no idea.
At the risk, I'm sure I should be controversial, but I've always chosen my science to be in areas where I can keep going back and measuring, and I have immense respect for what has been done in the field of cosmology. But all you can do there is observe. You can't design your experiment and do it. And there are many areas of science where our ability to get things right without being able to measure in many ways from many angles is rather limited. So I've avoided that problem, choosing to work in areas where I can be sure that observation is reliable.
One last question on that. I mean, Dawkins and others seem to think there is some clash between science and religion. In other words, if you are a real scientist, it's impossible to believe in religion. I think you implied when you talked about different parts of the brain that you don't see that, but you think that they are dealing with different kinds of questions. Is that right?
I suppose I've been lazy. I haven't really pushed myself, and if I did, I might find myself becoming an atheist. One cannot deny that we seem to have a need to create something like a religion, and to deny that would be to deny history. I don't like feeling that I need to abandon a sort of rationalist approach to knowing what has gone on in the past and what may happen in the future. But I don't know.